Breaking news from the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russia's defense ministry has announced that its forces have successfully intercepted and downed 354 drones in a massive overnight assault. This dramatic development comes just one day after Moscow launched an extensive and coordinated missile and drone campaign across Ukrainian territory, resulting in the deaths of 23 people and leaving more than 130 others injured. The escalation of warfare shows no signs of slowing down. As Russian forces continue their relentless onslaught on Ukrainian cities and infrastructure, Ukraine is intensifying its own strikes against Russian military and economic targets. Ukrainian forces are specifically targeting Russian energy facilities, refineries, and strategic export hubs in a calculated response to the attacks on their homeland. According to Russian military statements, air defense systems repelled approximately 50 drones over the Leningrad region. This interception occurred precisely as St. Petersburg was hosting a major annual economic forum, President Vladimir Putin's so-called Russian Davos, marking the fifth wartime economic forum since the invasion began. The event opened under heightened security measures, with flights at Pulkovo Airport briefly restricted due to the ongoing military operations in the region. Russia also reported intercepting 13 additional drones near Moscow itself. Meanwhile, in the Tambov region, Ukrainian drones managed to damage several buildings at an industrial site in Maritsk, demonstrating that Ukrainian forces continue to strike deep into Russian territory despite Moscow's air defense claims. However, the narrative becomes significantly more complex and tragic when examining the Ukrainian perspective on the same night of combat. Ukrainian forces claim that Russia launched a staggering 73 missiles and 656 drones throughout the night in this coordinated assault. Despite Ukraine's multi-layered air defense systems, dozens of these weapons penetrated the defenses and struck residential areas across the country, causing widespread devastation and civilian casualties. In Kyiv, the capital city, 7 people were killed and approximately 50 others were injured in the attacks. The situation was even more catastrophic in Dnipro, where a 4-story apartment building collapsed entirely due to direct hits from Russian missiles or drones. This collapse killed 16 people, including 2 children. The images of destruction were haunting. Residents frantically rushed to underground metro stations, carrying bags and blankets as explosions continued to echo across the city throughout the night. The international community has responded with strong condemnation. The United Nations issued a formal statement condemning these attacks, characterizing them as clear violations of international humanitarian law. UN officials emphasized that attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure are explicitly prohibited under international humanitarian law and must cease immediately. The Secretary General reiterated an urgent appeal for immediate de-escalation and a full, immediate, and unconditional ceasefire. Ukraine's Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, speaking from Estonia, expressed hope that the United States would soon send a delegation to Kyiv to witness the conditions on the ground and help intensify diplomatic negotiations. In his statement, Shmyhal said, "We really hope that the promised visit of the American delegation will help once again intensify negotiations, but solely by diplomatic means, because the American delegation really did promise to come to Kyiv. They have already been to Russia 7 times. It seems to me that in order to understand the conditions in which we live and function as a state, it is important to come to Kyiv to talk with Ukrainian society, to meet Ukrainian soldiers." This plea for American involvement highlights the desperation of Ukrainian leadership to secure international support and mediation in what has become an increasingly brutal conflict. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky praised the heroic efforts of rescue workers and emergency responders who worked tirelessly in the aftermath of the attacks. He also issued a stark warning to Ukrainian citizens to prepare themselves for the possibility of another massive assault on the second consecutive night. Zelensky stated, "Hundreds of people in Kyiv, Dnipro, and other cities worked in the aftermath of Russia's massive attack, extinguishing fires, helping the wounded, rescuing people trapped under rubble. I am grateful to everyone saving lives. According to our intelligence, another large-scale attack may occur tonight. Please, I strongly urge you to pay attention to air raid alerts." The latest attacks on Kyiv came after Russia reportedly deployed hypersonic Kinzhal ballistic missiles against the Ukrainian capital. These advanced weapon systems represent some of the most sophisticated military technology currently deployed in the conflict. Moscow has confirmed that hypersonic missiles were again deployed in this latest barrage, as Russia continues to intensify strikes against Kyiv's infrastructure with increasingly devastating weapons. This dramatic escalation of the conflict follows President Vladimir Putin's accusations that Ukraine was responsible for an attack on a student dormitory in Luhansk that resulted in 21 deaths and injured more than 40 others. In response to this alleged Ukrainian attack, Putin has vowed accountability and has ordered investigators to pursue those he holds responsible, setting the stage for potential further escalation. The cycle of attack and counterattack continues to spiral, with each side claiming military successes while civilian populations bear the brunt of the destruction. The use of increasingly advanced weaponry, the targeting of civilian infrastructure, and the massive scale of drone and missile operations represent a significant escalation in the intensity of the conflict. As the war enters this new phase of intensified aerial warfare, the humanitarian crisis deepens. Rescue workers continue their dangerous work pulling survivors from rubble. Medical facilities are overwhelmed with casualties, and millions of Ukrainians live in constant fear of the next barrage. The international community watches with growing concern as the conflict shows no signs of de-escalation, despite repeated calls for ceasefire and diplomatic resolution. The coming days and weeks will be critical in determining whether this escalation continues or if diplomatic channels can successfully intervene to reduce the violence and suffering. For now, Ukraine remains on high alert, bracing for the possibility of continued Russian attacks while simultaneously striking back at Russian military and economic targets in an attempt to degrade Moscow's ability to wage war. This developing situation represents one of the most significant moments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict since the initial invasion, with implications that extend far beyond the borders of Eastern Europe. The world watches as two nations engage in increasingly destructive warfare, with civilian populations caught in the middle and the international community struggling to find a path toward peace.